getting the first anti-Agenda 21 state law passed, and he has been working on Agenda 21 for, these many, many years, like decades. So he was way ahead of the game. Good?
Thank you. Quite frequently, I'm asked, who am I? Well, quite frankly, I'm just an ordinary individual in a room full of activists. So I hope that everybody goes forth from this meeting with a little more information and just duplicates everything and just works the crowd as much as possible to bring forth this information that's much needed. Judy, come on up here. What I did for a living, I worked in a steel mill for 33 years, retired from that, and then went to work for UAB and the University of Alabama at Birmingham for 10 years and retired from that. Didn't know I was going to wind up doing this pretty much all the time, and I've been all the way to Australia, up through Virginia, 10 days, 14 presentations, and now I'm running through Ohio. So this is a game changer for me as much as it is likely for you once you begin to understand the information. I am not a preacher, and I am not a lawyer, and I am not married to one either. So
don't play one on television.
Who am I will be defined as well as who you are in the afternoon session. Now, Judy is going to read one verse. Okay, Jesus Christ is doing the speaking in this. Okay, go right ahead now and read that for us.
Okay, settle with your opponents quickly while on the way to court with them. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison.
Okay, if you didn't hear that well, resolve the issue between you and your neighbor before you get to court, because the judge is just likely to throw you in jail. Now, what the heck does that have to do with anything? Well, if you want to know, you're going to have to come back this afternoon at 1 o'clock and hear the rest of the story. So that's my teaser. Now, by the way, this afternoon session is going to be entirely different. It's not going to be specifically focused on Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. So I had people that showed up yesterday in the afternoon session expecting to hear more about Agenda 21, and there was no discussion essentially about it. Our website is keepourrights.org. If you go to the upper left-hand corner when you get to the index page, you're going to see a link that will take you to the video page. And on that page, if you go to Stanton, Virginia, you will see a presentation. The first hour and 30 minutes of it is basically what you're going to see here today, this morning. The rest of that time, which is the whole thing is I think 2 hours and 38 minutes, is more or less the afternoon session. Of course, this is a little more detailed because this thing changes every time I do it. But at any rate, that's the closest I have to a recorded version of what you're going to see today in its entirety. Now, there are a couple of other videos that are out there. One is from Lewis County, Tennessee, and you'll see I'll put up a map of Lewis County in just a little bit. They are a county that back in 2009 produced a proclamation saying that everybody in the county should adopt sustainable development and inspire others to do the same. So that video now, in the beginning of it, is the Q&A that occurred after the presentation that you're about to see. And then the discussion that occurred between myself and the elected officials that were at that presentation, and the county commissioner stood up and said, if what I have heard today is true, we will vote to rescind that proclamation. And the ending of that video is the rescinding of that proclamation by Lewis County. Now, that is something that you can take to your local elected officials along with a much better video, which comes from Baldwin County, which is the largest landmass county in Alabama. And they voted to rescind their comprehensive plan. And over half of that video is just the county commissioners talking about the insidious nature of their local comprehensive plan and how it was going to rob everybody of their property rights. That is a much more definitive discussion of elected officials, and I highly encourage everybody to go out and look at that and make copies of it, spool it up to that section and say, here's what elected officials in another part of the country have discovered about their comprehensive plan, have something there that compares your comprehensive plans to theirs and just go right down the line and say, why are you backing something that's going to affect our private property rights? So, oh, by the way, if you go down to the left-hand side, there's a glossary. You will need that glossary when you go, or at least an understanding of it when you go to these public meetings dealing with visioning sessions and other type of open discussions dealing with comprehensive planning. That said, a good presenter always tries to tell you what he's going to tell you, then he tells you, and then he tells you what he told you. So this is my effort now to tell you what I'm going to tell you in this morning's session. What you're actually going to see is a look at sustainable development. In fact, it is a religion, and I'm going to repeat that several times. I'm trying to get over a point here. We're going to look at the global, the national, then the state, and local issues dealing with this. And that looks a little fuzzy. Is it fuzzy to y'all?
We could get some lights down in here. Would you like more?
Yeah, let's see what.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, you got it.
So, once we look at that, then we're going to come along and we're going to see what's next. We're going to see how sustainable development will actually affect your lifestyle. I don't know if you could kill the front too. That might help. And then we're going to look at the purpose of government. What is government really supposed to do in our society?
Don't kill all of the lights.
Don't kill all of the lights, the cameraman said. Recognizing and understanding the problem is 50% of the solution, and I am very glad to say that the state of Alabama has indeed recognized the insidious nature of sustainable development and Agenda 21. As a matter of fact, we are the only state, only government in the whole world that I can find that has ever produced a law that outlaws Agenda 21 and sustainable development. And we were asked to go to Australia and explain how we got this on the books and a little more about Agenda 21 after it passed, and it was quite an experience. Don't go to Australia expecting good food. They don't have, I'm just telling you my experience. I went to a McDonald's down there expecting to get a mocha. Don't even think about it. It's just a different taste. Now, the important thing about getting an Agenda 21 law on the books is not to focus on Agenda 21, because Agenda 21, and by the way, I happen to have a hard copy of it. I actually bought this from the United Nations back in 1995 and gave $25 for it. I think it went out of print for a while, so if you're wanting to get another one, I think they now have it back in print at the United Nations bookstore. So, what we need to do is focus not on Agenda 21, because it's merely one plan of action over many, many years that is created to implement this philosophy that didn't even have a name until 1987, and we now know it as sustainable development. In the United States, it was actually codified into official policy by the federal government in 1969. So it has a long history. You need to be able to read the verbiage in your comprehensive plan and understand the tenets of sustainable development in order to recognize it, because frequently, and believe me, the more people that know about this, the less and less you're going to see the phrases sustainable development, and frequently you'll never see Agenda 21. As a matter of fact, there was a survey made, and J. Gary Lawrence, who was a very prominent individual, he was a city planner for the city of Seattle, and he was also a delegate to some United Nations conferences, said that this survey that they had taken showed that the average individual, if he knew that Agenda 21 was in his comprehensive plan and associated with the United Nations, would say, oh no, we're not having anything to do with that, and then vote the elected official out of office. So that's why you don't see Agenda 21. He went on to say in that speech that we call it comprehensive planning and a number of other things. Smart growth is just one of those labels, but it's all the same process. And it's robbing us of our private property rights, just part of what it's actually robbing us. So, now let me get on to what the main point in this that I want to talk about is Virginia now has a proposed law. And it specifically points out Agenda 21, but does not say, and I want to point this out, other international law or ancillary plan of action that contravenes the Constitution. So that phrase needs to be put in there, because we now have a movement across the country to actually also write laws on Sharia law, and it would be labeled foreign law. So we're looking, and have been talking to the individual that's pushing this in Alabama. It almost passed last year. It may pass this year. If it does, then we want to strengthen our anti-Agenda 21 bill by putting in language in that bill that also focuses on Sharia and foreign law, which of course sustainable development is an international foreign law. So hopefully that can happen. But consider that if you know somebody is putting in Sharia law into your hopper. Sustainable development is a religion, and I think by the end of this presentation you likely will agree with me that indeed it is a religion. It has a long history. Again, it was adopted and codified into law in 1969. It was a very liberal Congress. They waited for President Nixon to come into office. As soon as he came into office, he signed it into law. That was the first year we had the Earth Day celebration. It was just a big coincidence, I rather think. It is the basis upon which society is being restructured, and it is a self-regulating governance system. Governance is replacing the word government. It is not representative government. Look for it. You'll see it most everywhere, and you'll begin to hear it in the news media. Governance is a coalition of government, corporations, and non-governmental organizations. The definition for it is actually in the 1999 Human Development Report. I know everybody's writing as fast as they can. If you want me to slow up and repeat where I'm pulling all this stuff out, I'll do that. And governance is the rules, regulations that govern the behavior of individuals, organizations, and companies. So when we hear the word governance, and you don't get your local official to define what he's talking about, you have just missed the boat. Because these words have different meanings and different definitions, and you think you're comfortable with them, but when they, as you will see in just a few minutes, freedom of choice is just one of those phrases that has an entirely different definition. Governance is also one that you're not familiar with. Now, there is the World Business Council of Sustainable Development, and here are just a few of those corporations. There are over 200 of them. Currently, there is also the United States Business Council for Sustainable Development, which of course mirrors this. And in this area, I was driving up, I happened to see a big Cargill plant. Now, Cargill is right there, and Monsanto is right there. Now, I do know that Monsanto is having a big fight, and a lot of people are talking about GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Believe me, all of these companies that are involved in agricultural industry are pushing sustainable agriculture. And it is a slow death for the family farm. They will ask for organic certification, going green. I mean, it just sounds wonderful. We just want to save the local farmer when in fact this movement is a suicide situation for the local family farmer. We'll get into that in food sheds in just a very few minutes. This is a slide that I have put together. Most of the slides that you're going to see from now on are actually slides from proponents of. I am definitely an opponent of everything that they have to say. I don't use information from people that hold an opinion like me. I just go out and get their information, I talk about it, and I am not unashamed to tell you that I am in firm opposition to everything that's going on right now with sustainable development, smart growth, and comprehensive planning, everything that you're about to see. I rather think that this is going to wind up just exactly like it did in the World War II at some point, unless we can become persuasive enough in enough numbers to in some way peacefully offset what's occurring. And believe me, the people in this photograph are just as adamant as their descendants are today. And this is a socialist movement. Ma'am.
Proponents of Agenda 21, do they really know what's going on?
I think so. We had a professor from a college yesterday that sat there and wanted to debate about Agenda 21. But if you'll, this is a rather long presentation, so if you'll bear with me, we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So with that now, here is the cover page for the report submitted to the United Nations. Now, in 1992, President Bush, the 41st President of the United States, went to Rio and signed this document. It is soft law. There is a movement now to make this permanent law, just like a treaty, and binding on all countries. I don't see why they need to do that, because it's already ingrained in your local comprehensive planning. But at any rate, you want to make it mandatory. Now, if you can go out to the United Nations database, and it has 170 plus countries. Scroll down to the U's and find USA, punch on it, and you can pull up this report, just like I did. There's absolutely nothing here that is conspiratorial, because conspiracy is two or more individuals who in secret plot to commit an evil act. This is not secret. This information's out there. All you have to do is just look and read. So if you're looking for a community block development grant in your area, that is in this document, which is 156 pages long. They go into great detail about how much money and what programs have been created in order to implement this philosophy called sustainable development. Now, this is the index page for the 2002 summit. It was an anniversary of the 1992 summit. 43rd President of the United States, Bush, sent his Secretary of State to this conference. And you're going to hear him at the end of this automated slide. I've got a total of 9 slides. The first 7 slides is a supposedly wise man standing on the stage talking to some very young individuals and telling them what's wrong with Mother Earth. And you're going to see photographs of what was going on the stage during that opening ceremony. Now, he has a very heavy accent, so I printed the words across the screen of what he was saying, so you can follow it along. At the end of the 7 slides, there are 2 more slides with Colin Powell, who will stand and say that you and I and President Bush have an enduring commitment to this philosophy called sustainable development. So hopefully everything works. I can push the right button, and I don't punch the mute button when I shouldn't. And here we go.
Life began with the earth, then came the plants, the animals, and finally the human being. Yes, we are all children of Mother Earth. That is why we must take care of her and be her custodians. She is the hand that feeds us and the heart that heals us. But I'm sad to say, we are failing. Greed and foolishness are eating deep into the fabric of humankind. We are failing to love and care for Mother Earth. This summit has cemented a new vision of sustainable development. The Johannesburg Plan of Action consolidates our work plans into one common agenda that includes our best thinking on sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, President Bush and the American people have an enduring commitment to sustainable development.
Well, of course, that was 2002, and now we have the Rio Plus 20 Summit, which occurred last June. And here now is the Secretary of State at that conference and what she had to say.
We have coalesced around an outcome document that marks a real advance for sustainable development. We know this is one of the most pressing matters of our time, because how we grow together over the long term isn't a question for only some countries. It is a question for all countries. A more prosperous future is within our reach. A future where all people benefit from sustainable development, no matter who they are or where they live. And that is why in the 21st century, the only viable development is sustainable development. We also have to be thinking different about development in our cities under the joint initiative on urban sustainability that President Rousseff and President Obama kicked off last year. We are bringing political officials from every level, from state, county, local, municipalities together, along with industry leaders and developers to find creative ways to generate sustainable economic growth. Let's use the private sector, particularly the consumer goods companies, as they have agreed to do, to make sure they have sustainable supply chains, the right kind of packaging and marketing that puts the least amount of burden on the earth we share. Let's bring in the nonprofits, the civil society organizations, faith groups, individuals, all of us, committed to realizing the sustainable development goals that we have embraced. We know that we will be judged not by what we say, nor even by what we intend to do, but by whether we deliver results for people alive today, and whether we keep faith with future generations. I'm very honored to be here with all of you, and I pledge my country's, the Obama administration's, and my own personal efforts to continue our work together. We simply cannot afford to fail. Thank you all very much.
Well, that was the national and international level, and I'm going to mute this. This is about 5 minutes of video dealing with, let's see, that was not the mute button. I don't know exactly what, that's the mute button, okay. This is testimony 2010 before the Banking Committee, and this is Mrs. Googe. She was at the time the spokesperson for the National County Association. She was also county commissioner for Carroll County, Maryland, and she comes in and tells the entire 20-year history of the association's involvement in implementation at the local level of Agenda 21. She doesn't mention Agenda 21, but she does throughout this entire speech talk about sustainable development and how she has helped with regional government and regional councils. And some of the things that she talks about is that local government is going to determine local livability and development, where and when it will occur. She also says that their plan is to purchase through whatever means. It may be transferable development rights, purchase of development rights, conservation easements, 100,000 acres of the county, which is 1/3 of that county. Now that land comes off the tax rolls. You know who's going to make up the shortfall, and it also comes out of productivity. So this is a double whammy on the economy. Land that was producing is no longer going to be producing, because this is a complete and total transformation of our society and how we think about what gross national product is, because we need to reevaluate that and put it all under this umbrella of sustainable development. So that's essentially what she had to say. You can go out and look at the other videos if you want to actually see what Mrs. Googe did say. Now, the good news is that her opponent ran on an open anti-Agenda 21 program, and he defeated her soundly. So she's no longer Now, the fact is that we can now take off the tinfoil hats. We're not the ones with tinfoil hats. These people are. These people that deny this is actually occurring. There's concrete information, and there's enough people out there that are starting to hear about this that we need to have an open discussion. And that's, after all we're wanting to do is have a discussion and bring it out to the general public. And if we're going to become a socialist society, Lord help us, they'll decide by their vote to keep and retain these people in office that are actually doing this to us. I hope that we have enough wisdom that was granted providentially that we can now extend freedom and liberty to our future generations. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. But at any rate, hopefully this will help enlighten you as to where we really need to go. Now, if you go to the website for the state of Ohio, and this is, by the way, just all I did was go to the Ohio code, typed in Ohio code, and I got to this website, and I just made a little photograph of that and stuck it up on this slide. And in this little window right here, I typed in sustainable. And I searched the Ohio Revised Code. Now, in Ohio, you have the Ohio Constitution, the Ohio Code, and the Administrative Code. Most people don't have a clue the difference between any of those. But there is a hierarchy, there is a pecking order in this, and I looked first at the Ohio Revised Code, and there are 9 hits associated with sustainable development. I then went to the Revised Administrative Code, and there are actually 11 hits associated with that. And some of those, I didn't take a lot of time just to look at them, some of them don't appear to be sustainable development, but you don't know until you go in and read the full law, because it only brings up a small snippet of the verbiage from that particular code. Now, the revised code looked like it did have some regulations that were going to affect a well. And you're going to have a meter on your well to determine how much water you draw from Mother Earth's resources in order to be in sync with the carrying capacity, CARRYING capacity for your local area, because there has to be a measurement of the number of people within a specific area to determine how much resources are being extracted from Mother Earth to put it in balance again, because we're out of balance and that balance has to be reasserted. So this is also one of those handouts that Eileen was talking about. That's the first thing, is to find out what's already on the books, get it off the books as you can. Actually, Georgia already has a sustainable agricultural law. It's HB 225 that the people in Georgia are struggling with currently. So I went down, Eileen was talking about some of the treaties also that are associated with Agenda 21. The Climate Change Treaty is just one of them. So I went down, it's also known as the Kyoto Accords, as she said, and I began to look for good quotes from local comprehensive planning in the state of Ohio to kind of bring it out that it's already there. So I went to Athens County, and I understand there's supposed to be a very liberal college down there, so it's kind of understandable. But believe me, while this is a good verbiage, a good example, it's in your other comprehensive plans throughout the entire country. Ohio's no different than anybody else. So here, and this is the soft sell. This is, I'm telling you, this is a soft sell on trying to encourage you to adopt ordinances and accept ordinances that are based off of climate change treaty. Now here's the first part of this. From the standpoint of land use plan, how do activities in Athens County contribute to global warming? Now, this is an official comprehensive plan adopted by the elected officials. If that plan is allowed to stand, it's just like adverse possession. In other words, it needs to be rebutted. I'm going to go over rebutting and how you need to rebut in this afternoon session. But you can't rebut orally. They presented an official policy in writing. The citizens, the people of Ohio, need to rebut this specific plan, or the residents in Athens County. It's a foregone conclusion by reading this sentence that global warming is occurring. Well, I hate to tell you, but in my opinion, that's just somebody's opinion. And I don't want to have a law written based off of somebody else's opinion about what may happen in the future. All right, can development be planned in such a way that limits energy use? Well, your smart meter is part of that plan already. And we're going to preserve woodlands and grasslands that act as carbon sinks, carbon sequestering. So we'll actually maybe have a plan that will pay a farmer carbon credits, that will create a market so that he can swap those credits just like money. There's actually one already in Chicago. Now this is the soft sell. So now I'm going to go to a hard sell. Now this is an actual advertisement that was produced in England. I don't know if anybody happened to see this, but I have had extreme reaction. One reaction is, oh my God, it's just so bloody, I just can't watch. Well, I'm telling you, it's bloody. If you have a squeamish stomach, hide your eyes or maybe even leave the room. If you do, and I've had the other. I watch bones. What's the big deal? You know, you see the skeletons with bugs crawling out of them. You know, this is nothing. So at any rate, I'm going to show you this, and this is, I think, the hard sell. So if I can get this up and running. Oh.
There's a brilliant idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone start cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone eventually. Now this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, miss?
Well, like getting your dad to inflate the law, or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying, or buying energy-saving light bulbs. We're thinking of using our car lane. I'll go to Bible school. That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic! And there's not. Philip and Tracy. Fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now everybody, please remember to read chapter 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation, except Philip and Tracy.
Right, just want to check on that 10-10 thing. Had some brilliant ideas from lots of you how the firm can cut down emissions by 10%. Just a quick show of hands, everyone who wants to get involved. Great, that's nearly everybody. And yeah, just for the record, no pressure. Those who aren't quite convinced about it yet. Cool, no problem. Your choice. Okay, so those of you planning something here or at home should probably get working on it. Oh, gorgeous. Those of you who aren't, excellent. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be back here at Spurs. So many happy memories for me. Anyway, tell me something. What is this 10-10 thing the club is doing?
Well, it means that we're trying to cut our carbon emissions by 10% this year. And Tottenham Hotspur Football Club was the first to sign up.
We've changed the floodlights on White Hart Lane, so no more energy.
Lots of our fans are coming to matches on buses, trains, and bikes and stuff, rather than coming by car.
I see. Whatever, I wouldn't do it. It seems like distraction from football to me.
Just try it, David. You don't have to join it, just ignore it. No pressure. Why not? Let's do some penalty.
10-10. Hundreds of thousands of people, schools, businesses, hospitals, movie stars, knitting circles, scout troops, presidents and governments, all tackling climate change in more than 40 countries. Care to join us? No pressure.
That is great to me. Thanks, Julian.
Happy to help.
So what are you thinking of doing for the 10-10 yourself?
What, are you kidding me? I thought that by doing this voiceover, that was my contribution.
Right. No, absolutely. No pressure.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, now, notice that we have an eyeball right here, and there's one eyeball right there. These people are deadly serious. And I hope you notice that when it scrolled across the cities that are involved in this, Cincinnati was one of those cities. So let me make the point here that our men that fought in World War II went across Europe. They saw the bloodiest battles that man could imagine. There was a decision made that what they saw could not be photographed, and the horrific photographs could not be sent back home because they were fearful that we would withdraw our support of those men when they needed it the most. Now let me say that those men that had seen everything that war could offer walked into Auschwitz and Dachau and these other places, and they saw what a socialist, communist agenda had produced. And there was a decision made that we have to document this. We have to put this on record so that people in the future generations know exactly what happened when the socialists came to power. Now, that decision was made after the fact. This is a photograph, a video of before the fact. They're telling you exactly what ought to happen to you if you don't agree with their foregone conclusions. So, I'm saying that this should be, if anything else can motivate you, this should be a motivating factor. Now, let me scroll on down and talk now. We've looked at the national, international, state level, and now we're going to look at the community. What it actually means to have a sustainable community. And I need to tell you where this slide came from. In 1996, there was a conference held in Istanbul, Turkey. The name of that conference was Habitat 2. I'm going to have a quote from Habitat 1 in just a few minutes, which was held in 1976. 20 years later now, we have progressed to the point where we have Habitat 2 And our delegates went to this conference and agreed to the platform. You need to go, if you want to know more information, go out and read the platform for Habitat 2. It's very explicit about what needs to be done to human settlements. Now, there were 3 gold medals that were given out at that particular conference, and this won one of those gold medals. And this was submitted to the United Nations Conference by the Washington State University. The name of the program is a Comprehensive Urban Regenerative Process. And this graphics is actually in that book that was submitted to the United Nations. Now, it has the actual definition for a sustainable community. So think about this. When you go to one of these visioning sessions and you're talking to your professional planner or perhaps your politicians that's been well schooled in this, and you say, oh, well, what is a sustainable community? Invariably, they're going to say, well, it's just whatever you want it to be. All you have to do is just tell us what you think your community ought to be, and we'll put it in this book, and voila, it will be produced. Well, that's not, I wasn't born last night. I eat turnips, but, At any rate, here now is the real definition for a sustainable community. A sustainable community is one which provides all of its own needs for air, water, land, food, fiber, and energy resources within the confines of its own site. Literally, that is the objective. Are they going to attain it? I don't know. They're certainly going to try. And these regulations seek to make this a reality. So you can count on it. I even just ran across a fiber shed where all of the fibers that are used for clothing, all of the dyes, all of the labor is within a given area, and nothing for clothing comes from outside that area. So you can talk about food sheds, fiber sheds, energy sheds. It's all to be produced within the confines of its own site. Now, freedom of choice, and by the way, this is, when I talk about authoritative documents, this is not from a publication from anybody that even is a proponent. This is a publication from the state of Minnesota, and on page 73, it has the actual definition. By the way, you can go out online and look this up. This is available in PDF. I just happened to get in and get a hard copy, and it has, on 73, it has the definition for freedom of choice, and I know that if I said, well, what is freedom of choice to you, you'd certainly have some kind of concept about what it might mean. But here now is the real definition for a sustainable community. And freedom of choice is people should be able to choose where they live and do business as long as they pay the identifiable cost of those choices and do not impose unaccounted for costs on other people or nature now or in the future. Now, some of the main tenets of sustainable development are wrapped up into this definition of freedom of choice. First, you're not paying the identifiable cost. That's an underlying cost for literally everything that we don't currently pay in this economic system that we have. So we have to identify that cost and intergenerational equity. In other words, we have to look forward to how many generations, I think it's 7 generally speaking, and determine that we are using finite resources from Mother Earth and we are limiting future generations' ability to access that same resource. So we have to limit what we extract from Mother Earth. There is then intra-generational equity, which means that we have to distribute Mother Earth's resources equitably among everybody currently existing in this world. And then we have something called species equity. In other words, we are just one species that has evolved to a dominant status, because after all, when you accept evolution as a criteria, you are just one more species among many that just, the other ones just haven't attained the enlightened status that we have. So we have to ensure that we don't restrict those other species' ability to attain that higher status in cognitive space, or whatever you might want to call it. Now, that kind of sounds pie in the sky, but in fact, we're well acquainted and have had this so long that we don't even think about it. It's the Endangered Species Act. What was derived from the National Environmental Policy Act, the act I was just talking about earlier, and it's a usurpation of God's throne. God gave man dominion over the earth. And through this society, we established that private property rights was the best way to preserve and maintain the resources of what God has given us dominion over. Here now, the government has said and established an agency under the executive branch, and if you actually go out to the White House website and scroll over to the right-hand side, you will see the Council on Environmental Quality. That is a council that has been established under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which says that a toad frog can be declared to have more rights than you do. It's part of species equity. Exactly what this freedom of choice definition holds. So now let's scroll on down to the next slide. And here now is a slide from proponents of sustainable development. And this slide says some sustainability linkages. I call this the wheel of sustainability. And indeed, this is just part of the all-inclusive, comprehensive sustainable development. And you can pick up on any one of these particular subjects. And really, there should be sermons based off of this. We should teach this to our children, what it means to adopt the philosophy of sustainable development and what it means to liberty and freedom. Unfortunately, we don't have enough people in the pulpit and we don't have enough teachers to understand what's actually being taught. And as a matter of fact, I was talking to a professor from a university where I was yesterday that teaches environmental sustainability. And he really wanted to be argumentative, and frankly I had to get between him and the crowd because the crowd wanted to eat him up.
They weren't real young either, so you had to admire their mettle.
So now let me talk about food policy and what food policy is going to mean under sustainability. Now this is a slideshow from Clackamas County, Oregon, and we have an urban center. And around that urban center is a metropolitan food shed. So now everything that is consumed in the metropolitan center is intended to be grown in that metropolitan food shed. Quite literally, anything that comes from outside will have a tariff applied to it. And we have more than that. And notice right here we have the food shed, the wood shed, the water shed, and the energy shed. So that harkens back to that definition from Habitat 2, and yes, I think all of these people ought to be taken to the woodshed. My take on that. All right, here's a slide from Seattle and King County out on the West Coast, and it is a design actually for nutrition experts. In other words, this was a person that was making a presentation to a group of professionals in the food industry, cafeterias and other similar type things. And here's what one plank says. One of the goals of our food system is that social and environmental justice from seed to table. Everything associated with putting the seed in the ground has to be measured in the two aspects of sustainable development. And there's actually three, social, economic, and environmental, but we're going to measure those two aspects, social and environmental, when the seed goes in the ground. Whatever is associated with putting that seed in the ground. Obamacare, does your farm worker have Obamacare? Does he have a living wage? A multitude of things that I can't even conjure up in my mind that would be associated with measuring the social equity issues involved in putting that seed into the ground have to be accomplished. In Alabama, we already have had 3 food summits. This one occurred in 2009, and actually this was the front page of a local newspaper in Birmingham. I happened to pick up a copy of it. Now this logo right here is the Alabama Sustainable Agricultural Network. If you go out and look them up online, you can actually see their 990 forms. 990 forms are part of the IRS reporting system. This group is receiving federal funds. They are asking farmers, local farmers, and I'm sure they don't tell those local farmers that they're getting government funding, but they're asking local farmers to go to Montgomery, our state capital, and lobby for organic food certification and other regulations. As a matter of fact, we narrowly defeated this past legislative session a program which would certify organic farms, locally grown farms, and restaurants that agreed to participate in the program. Of course, there's got to be a governmental cut right off the top, so this is automatically going to put money in a bureaucracy that's got to be created to oversee the whole thing. There was intended to be a little green sticker to go on the door or front of the restaurant that said, we're green and we're local and we buy organic. you know, the upper yuppie thing that is really sells nowadays. Well, this thing is, of course, in order to maintain your organic certification, you're going to have to follow all of the BMP's best management practices. And I'm certain that with Monsanto and Cargill and everybody else that's involved in this, you'll have new regulations all along the way, and eventually you're going to squeeze out that family farm. Well, what about the farms that are organic but just don't have the resources to qualify, to contact the Montgomery, or don't know about it? They're automatically squeezed out of the market. They have a smaller market that they can sell to. So you can kind of see how this interferes with the free market system dealing with food and consumption of it. Now, one of the handouts, and if we have more people than I have handouts, I have more that's in the car. We produced a small trifold brochure that talks about sustainable agriculture and trying to alert farmers and people that are involved in the agriculture and food industry as to what sustainable agriculture really is. Now this is, if you like this and you wanted to take this and use it for your own, I'll send it to you without our logo on it. Whatever you find that we have, nothing's copyrighted, we want you to use whatever you think would benefit you in your area. We need as many people to know about this as possible. So I can send you that without the logo. You can print a sticker, or you can print, we printed I think 5,000 of these, got them dirt cheap, and we've been giving them out everywhere we've been making presentations. So I'm encouraging you to take that under consideration and maybe use that if you want to build your constituency in your local area. In Birmingham, we already have a food charter, and we have a food council, a group. They have meetup groups. They're on the website Meetup. There's various ways that you can bring interested people to the forefront. I'm certain that the average person that just sees something on a Meetup may participate in this and have no concept of what he's actually participating in. And in fact, I did talk to an influential black man in Atlanta that was, after seeing the presentation, he said, "Oh my goodness, I've lent my name to local farming here in Atlanta and I had no concept of what was actually going on." And I talked to him several times later on after that presentation, and he said, indeed, the people that are backing this are part of this sustainability movement, and they've used my name to further their agenda. So that's something that we need to be alerted to, because after all, you may find someone that's adamant about sustainable agriculture. They have no concept of what they're really participating in. Don't consider them the enemy, because if you can get them convinced that and make them understand that what's going on, then you may have an opponent of and a proponent for your side that's very adamant. It's kind of like a non-smoker. You know, I used to smoke. I am adamantly against smoking. I used to give smokers you know what, but at any rate, that's usually what happens. Now, the first point, this is the first version of the charter for the Food Council in the Birmingham area, and here's what it says. It's very sketchy. It says that access to nutritious, affordable, culturally and appropriate safe food is a basic human right. So if you can't afford a mouthful of food, somebody's going to have to pay for it. It is a human right. And we'll get into rights, constitutional rights and unalienable rights in this afternoon. I'm sure that everybody here would assume that they have constitutional rights, and we'll try to define the difference between the two. Perhaps we can come to a conclusion on that. At any rate, it is a human right to have a balanced diet. Now, in Ohio, you already have the beginnings of this. You have the Ohio Food Shed and the Cleveland Area Food Policy Council. And they, no doubt, will write a food charter for your area. It just will be the beginning, and that will spread throughout the entire state. After all, in Georgia, they have the HB 225, which says that sustainable agriculture is the norm for the entire state. Each county could create their own, and likely will, food council, create their own food shed and their own food charter and the proper diet that everybody should eat. Now, consider Obama's care knows how much you weigh and you're supposed to eat a healthy diet. Well, when you go to the grocery store and begin to purchase items, we'll look and see what RFID chips have in a relationship, radio frequency. Who knows what a radio frequency identification chip? We got about a third. So that would interplay with the database of Obamacare and the food policy set for what you could or could not buy, perhaps, when you check out at the grocery store. Oh my gosh. Well, here we have a food policy council and a food charter. And food charters have certain statements, such as this one. The term food citizenship is defined as the practice of engaging in food-related behaviors that support, rather than threaten, the development of a democratic, socially, and economically just and environmentally sustainable food system. Now, my point about this particular quote is that it's not sufficient to have no opinion. You sit on a fence, you're threatening your food citizenship. We need people that agree enthusiastically with this program, and they get on board and they convince their neighbors. After all, the proclamation that I just talked about from Lewis County said that each individual should adopt this and inspire his neighbor to do the same thing. Food citizenship would be part of that social justice program that you need to be enthusiastic about. And if you're not enthusiastic, you're threatening your food citizenship. Now, this next quote says that food democracy or food citizenship recognizes that consumers can identify the interests of others, and they are food workers, other consumers, future generations, and other species. Now, are we not talking about that definition? Intergenerational equity, intragenerational equity, and species equity. All wrapped up in this. Why is this quote important? Because it was in a doctorate thesis in Drexel University a number of years ago. So this person now is looking to get that doctorate. She hasn't put anything in there that she doesn't think won't garner her that doctorate degree. So you can see this is already in the higher ivory tower of education. And these people that are in that education are teaching your children these concepts. That's why that quote is important. Food charter. And this is one that I have sent electronically. It's actually a 2-page handout. And it is a much more advanced food charter. I'll just quickly go over some of it. This paragraph right here talks about food security and the requirement to ensure that everybody in your local area has a acceptable diet. So I would imagine if you have an influx of people from Canada, French maybe, or maybe Mexicans, you may have to have certain things that you normally don't see on the supermarket shelf, such as goat and other type things that might be culturally acceptable to them in their diet, because we have to have equity throughout this current generation. Now, this particular paragraph right here talks about resource allocation. Water, greenhouse gas emissions, all of that has to be involved and instilled into the agricultural and food system, which it currently is not. And that's part of this movement for sustainable agriculture. Let me run through social justice. A lot of this talks about social justice just so that everybody can come to the same page and understand what social justice is all about. I went out and got the definition of it. Progressive taxation, income redistribution, property redistribution, equality of opportunity, and equality of outcome. So when you talk about social justice, seed to table, we have to incorporate all of those concepts in order to ensure that it is sustainable for this coming future utopia. Locavore. With all of these programs, typically you're going to have new words and phrases. This was a new word for me. And I was making a presentation at the University of Alabama, and I talked about a locavore, and 2 guys in the back raised their hand and said, "Oh yeah, we are a locavore." I had no idea that they were already committed to eating only food grown within a 100-mile area. Generally, the food shed is 100 miles, and now we have a food that is a citizen that is in agreement with this, so his food citizenship is secure because he has agreed to eat food only from that 100-mile area. And this is 2 magazine articles dealing with that. This one produced in 2006, and this one, notice what kind of mode of transportation this individual has taken. It is a kindly mode of transportation to Mother Earth. He's thinking about intergenerational equity because he doesn't want to use gasoline, which would restrict future generations' access to that very same precious commodity that Mother Earth has so graciously provided for us, and used a bicycle to go out and get his sustenance for that particular day. Rubber tires, that has been commented on, and we only get to one level and then we think about the other thing. So next it will be walking, and I'm sure that somebody, when I say walking, they'll say, what about shoe leather? Yeah, so we'll be barefoot walking into the farm if they'll allow us to go to the farm. Okay, now we have food miles, and that's merely the distance food travels to get to your plate. This is a poster that is intended to be on the school wall. It's a TIFF. I don't know if anybody that's a .pdf, .jpeg. This is a TIFF. That means it is a highly high resolution file, and it is intended to blow up and actually be a poster on the wall just like that. Now, with each mode of transportation, we have some form of degradation to Mother Earth. And then we have a great big caution sign, and I can see a teacher standing in front of 8- and 9-year-old children saying, you should care, because you have damaged the environment for a butterfly and a blue jay, because you're going to eat that carrot that got on that plane somehow mysteriously and flew in from California. And you need to feel guilty about it. Well, I can assure you, I've heard horror stories about children that when they learned that their bed was made from a slaughtered tree, that they cried because they had harmed Mother Earth. That's already been in the news a number of years ago. So this poster kind of goes along with that. Next, we have some of the external costs that you're not currently paying, which include transportation, soil degradation, irrigated-related groundwater depletion, pesticide and fertilizer misuse. The USDA has already declared pesticide to be a pollutant. It has to be regulated. Regulations are coming for everybody. I was in Florida making a presentation, and somebody spoke up when I made that comment, and they said, oh, we have new regulations coming next year, which everybody will have to adhere to and register when they spread fertilizer. Now, this is starting first on the commercial end. Well, if it's starting on the commercial end, and we have to have that regulation for them, it won't be long. We'll be looking at the family and how much the family uses regarding fertilizer. So now let me move on to the next subject and pick up on transportation. And I really thought transportation was just a means to get me from point A to point B. No, that's not an in and of itself. It is merely a means by which we support individual and collective goals and objectives. Socialism. We have to incorporate socialism into transportation. Now here's a quote from the funding report for the state of South Carolina, 2003 through 2022, and it says equity issues include income distribution, urban, rural, and regional geographic differences, and by now you should be able to recognize the next phrase, intergenerational concerns. Intergenerational equity has to be written into the state of South Carolina's regulations to be compliant with the concepts of sustainable development. Here is a report from the state of Tennessee, and this is the cover page, produced in 2009 by the Tennessee Department of Transportation. This is the state of Tennessee that has produced this report. And it says that the first approach starts with the premise that we need to convince you to change the way you live. Then the primary objective of this approach is to reduce vehicle miles traveled by restructuring society so that your needs for work, shopping, personal and social, as well as recreational needs can be met in our local community by driving short distances, walking, or riding your bicycle. Now that's the state of Tennessee incorporating sustainable development, and there it is right on top, sustainable transportation in Tennessee. That's what it means in order to be sustainable. Now, I'm going to pull just one quote from Agenda 21, and this is paragraph 40.4. There's actually 3 sentences in this paragraph. I'm going to look at 2. And it says, commonly used indicators such as gross national product and measurements of individual resource extraction from Mother Earth flows do not provide an adequate indication of sustainability. So, they go on to say, indicators of sustainable development need to be developed to provide a solid basis for decision making at all levels, and I'm going to add all levels of government, local, state, and national, to contribute to a self-regulating sustainable system. Remember governance? Okay, this is what it's referring to, a self-regulating governance system. So now let me try to explain, and believe me, my mind is hard for me to wrap around all of this, and this is the best example I know of to try to explain this. This is the I-95 Coalition from Maine to Florida. That's their logo, and they actually have 35 authorities, which includes some authorities up in Canada. So they're working on this project. Now, the name of the report is the Multi-State BMT-Based Fee Institutional and Legal Analysis. I'll leave that up long enough. If you want to write it down, you can go look it up. It's about 34 pages long, and it gets into a discussion about BMTs. And what they actually want to do is to take the information from your onboard computer in your automobile that knows where you were and when you were at whatever location, and when you drive up to the gas pump, that information is transferred automatically to that great big database in the sky, and they look and see where you were. Did you drive through a sensitive ecological area and harm a butterfly? Did you drive through a socially unjust area? And does that area need to have a higher taxation rate from the rest of the community to offset what has occurred to prior generations? So automatically it calculates you and who you are within the society and figures out how much you must pay because of where you've been and when you were there on that particular tank of gasoline. So now the discussion goes on further and says, well, right now we don't know that local municipalities and county governments would buy into this. We don't know if there would be some kickback. Now, my opinion is that there's no agreement by local officials to raise taxes. All they have to do is hold their hand out, and with the economy continuing to take a downturn, somebody's going to lay a check in their hand based off of how much price for the gasoline you're going to pay. So this is a win-win deal for them. They don't have to look you in the face and say, we didn't raise the tax. You know, if you want the gasoline, you're going to pay the price. It's just what we have to do to live within this new utopia called sustainable development. And if you listen for the newscast, several months ago, California and Louisiana were talking about VMTs, raising revenues based off of VMTs. That particular newscast was dealing with it because think about this, we have more fuel efficient automobiles. So we get to drive the same amount of miles and use less gas. Tax on gasoline is based on how much gas you use. They're automatically losing revenue because you have more fuel efficient cars. They got to figure out how to raise it. So this is a perfect way to do it. How they're going to do it and how to institute all of this, I don't know. You may never know it. You may just pay 1 or 2 cents more than somebody else without ever realizing it, and it's all a done deal through a governance software system.
Don, what's a VMT? What's that stand for?
Vehicle Miles Traveled, VMTs. Okay, now, RFID, I've already mentioned RFID, Radio Frequency Identification Device. It is probably in everything that we own already because this has been going on since, I know mid-90s when I first began to read about it. But an RFID chip identifies the packaging or the contents. It identifies whatever the manufacturer wants it to identify. In this case, there's a paper carton that has it's called a C-tag, and there are various names for it. This is a medicine cap that has a RFID chip in it, a flip-flop that has one, and of course one is sewn into the lapel of the coat. Now for the merchant, this makes perfect sense. He can sew in an RFID chip that identifies this coat as being whatever size it is, whatever color it is, and when it's sold and moves off of his shelf, he automatically knows how many of what color to buy, what size, and it's automatically reordered. He doesn't have to do anything. It'll all be done through software. A governance system through software to identify what has been sold makes perfect sense for the merchant. So that's one reason why this is being pushed, but there are many other reasons. And here now is a slide from, of course, a proponent. Actually, this is from a company that sells RFID chips. And we have a reader in this shelf system, I guess you'd call it, that reads the chip, the passive chip, because the passive, there's 2 kinds, maybe actually more, but there's an active and passive. In other words, a passive chip requires a reader to shoot a beam at it and bounce back the information. So this is a passive reader in this shelf that reads the tag on each one of those containers, knows when that container was taken off the shelf, knows when it's put back, knows the shelf life of the item, can alert whoever is working in this laboratory or whatever facility it is that this has gone beyond the expiration date, or it is time to reorder, or whatever information they want to transmit about it. We have also RFID chips in probably every package that we have already, and here's just one example. This grocery cart has RFID chip in each one of those packages. And this PowerPoint talks about just walking out of the grocery store with this cart, and automatically those little electronic digits that are in your supposed bank account are deducted and moved from one area to the other. Comes out of your account. So, what happens when you go and purchase all of these things, for instance, ice cream. Oh, by the way, we have smart fridges, and that would coincide with the smart meter. So let's say you buy a half-gallon of ice cream, and you are delayed getting home, and the RFID chip is designed to measure the temperature of the ice cream. And you go home and you open the door on your new smart meter, smart fridge, and you put the ice cream in, reads that RFID chip and says, oh, it's not fit for human consumption because it went above the allowable temperature. So now it displays on the screen and says, you can't consume that, it's got to be disposed of. Now, I didn't know where else to go with this until I talked to the Director of Sustainability for the city of Chattanooga. And he was talking about the triple bottom line during his presentation. You're going to see about the triple bottom line in just a few minutes. And I began to think about what I could ask him during his Q&A that might help me understand and begin to explain what was going on, the relationship between this. And I said, how does the triple bottom line relate to RFID chips? And I thought he was going to, but because I was in a room much like this with people like-minded, I thought he was just going to back up and acquiesce and not answer the question. But no, he became very excited almost. He said, oh, it just relates to the ability to read what you dispose of. We already have pilot programs where we have trash cans with readers in it. And we can now credit you with disposing of in an ecologically sustainable manner items that should be disposed of. Of course, the opposite is, do you get demerits? You know, if you've got a plus, is there a minus? So when you don't dispose of it, and let's say that you don't dispose of that ice cream that has gone over the limit, and now the database in the sky is alerted, the reader on the trash can is looking for the container of ice cream. So now who's going to show up at your house, a health authority, or is it going to be somebody? I have no idea. Is it going to be code enforcement? I can't answer that. But I know that reader's there because that Director of Sustainability told me they're already experimenting with that. So that's kind of where we're going with that. Oh, and by the way, talking about the smart fridge, the smart fridge will display things like what you have in your refrigerator, expiration dates, propose maybe recipes that you might combine with ingredients you have, things that you buy on a regular basis. It would automatically know and alert you, well, you're just about out. You need to go out and purchase the replenishment supply. Sir?
Have you come across too that if you're outside of an area where you're not supposed to travel, that your credit cards will be no good and they won't work?
I'm sure that is coming, yeah. And we can get into that because there's an interesting point that on currency that was made back in the 90s, and I'm getting off track, but the point is that we're going to have amortization of time for money. In other words, if the money's out of the bank for a certain amount of time, it depletes its value. So that was a proposal from the Federal Reserve Bank out of North Carolina, I think, a number of years ago. Let me get back to the fridge. I was telling this about the smart fridge to a woman in the legislature for the state of Alabama, and I said, oh, you can take things out of the smart fridge and put it next to your smart stove. It will read the RFID chip, set the temperature, tell you how long to put it in the stove, and tell you when to take it out. She says, I can't wait. Can't wait to get it. And I'm sitting here saying, oh my goodness. Oh boy, we're already there. So here now is that graphics. This is the end graphics on RFID chips. We have a manufacturer. It goes to the grocery store, then through the transportation system to the grocery store, to your home, and then disposed of properly. So these are all slides from proponents of these various entities. Now, let me pick up on social health. And what does social health mean to the average citizen in a sustainable community? So now we'll look at Director Bosworth. He was director of the USDA in 2003. And this is a speech that he gave in 2003. And he's talking about in the speech the National Report on Sustainable Forest. And the fact that the USDA at the time was required, as other agencies are required, to submit regulations on a yearly basis that indicate what movement that agency is making towards sustainable development. Now that was 2003. They now have to produce a report and ordinances on a biannual basis. And there's one example I know a lot of people became very upset about, because there was one regulation that was proposed for small diesel engines. And I know one woman has a small diesel lawnmower. And it would be a requirement that the same kind of records be kept for that lawnmower as there are for CDL license and tractor trailers on the interstate. This would also mean that young children that are on a family farm could not operate that because they didn't have a CDL license. So all of these things now became very vocal, and they rescinded that particular regulation. But that was just one, I think, of 100 and something for this one federal agency. They'll come back and reinstitute that whenever the opposition to it dies down. Now, Director Bosworth in this speech was talking about the relationship, and this is too small, I really need to make it bigger. Let's see, in other words, sustainability depends on how social, economic, and ecological components interrelate. And he says it is so important that it has actually earned its own name, the triple bottom line. You will see one of the phrases that's used with this is people, planet, and profit. In other words, put people first, Mother Earth second, and profit comes third. So it also has other relationships, and there's an actual handout that I'll go over in just a few minutes that relates specifically to this area. I went out to the Department of Transportation for the state of Ohio, and I typed in the triple bottom line, sustainable development, and I came up with a number of hits. Just wanted to include some to let you know that you're not being left off the sustainability boat. You're right there with me. It says climate change and sustainability and the Ohio Department of Transportation. So the next slide in this series talks about the triple bottom line and how all of these interrelate. Well, now this is a global plan. And of course, you can go anywhere in this globe and look up triple bottom line. By the way, if you want to do your own research, just type in triple bottom line, put it in quote marks, and then PPT for PowerPoint presentation, and you're going to have more stuff pop up than you can imagine. Well, I was doing a little bit of research on PowerPoint presentations and triple bottom line, and here's what I found from Japan. We don't have three interlocking circles. Typically, you see the most recognizable logo is three interlocking circles. Each one represents one aspect of sustainable development. Where they come together, it is said that sustainability is occurring. Japanese, being just a little bit different, now have a triangle. And we have environment, society, and the economy. And rising up from this auspicious foundation is happiness. Now, what it says is that to be sustainable, a society must satisfy the requirements of the triple bottom line. However, that alone is not sufficient. The feelings of people living in society are also important. Even if the triple bottom line requirements are satisfied, society is not sustainable if you feel unhappy about the situation. So, therefore, we define a sustainable society as one that satisfies the triple bottom line and makes you feel happy about what's being done to you. So, what would make you feel happy? Universal health care. And that's, as a matter of fact, it goes through, all of these are kind of a litany of things that it expresses, and one of them is universal health care. So that's part of this thing that's supposed to make you feel good. Now, if you're a malcontent, I don't know what to make of that. But at any rate, let me talk about GSF. GSF. GSF stands for Gross Social Feel Good Index.
That's not even worth writing down.
This is already, I ran across a comprehensive plan for the county of Washington in Virginia that was written a number of years ago, and it had a survey to determine if the people in that county were happy about the comprehensive plan. But it didn't call it a social feel-good index. See, we've already been acclimated to this, and we don't recognize that we already have surveys that measure that index to determine if we like what's being done to us. We just don't have enough knowledge to base those opinions off of. So, now let me pick up on land use planning, green development, and the biodiversity treaty. Now there are some high officials that talk about this, and they want to think that the biodiversity treaty really has more to do, not the biodiversity treaty, excuse me, the green development and setting aside of certain areas for animals is more under the Kyoto Accords or the Climate Change Treaty. My opinion is that the biodiversity treaty is the dominant treaty in this particular situation. Now the biodiversity treaty asks for all predator animals to be reintroduced. Every animal that was here when European man came is to be reintroduced. All of the species that European man brought with him are considered invasive. They have to be removed. And then we have to set aside 50% of the continental United States for animal habitation only, 10% buffer zone, and the remaining 40% of the land mass is where we will reside. Now this is not going to happen overnight, and I don't think it's going to happen through somebody putting a gun to your head. We'll have $10 gallon gasoline, a number of regulations on septic tank water use, all kinds of manner of things to make it untenable to live in the rural areas. Will be enticements to cajole you to move from where you are. And after all, who wants to have be a politician and have somebody complaining about certain aspects that they don't have control over? So this would be an easy done deal. Now let me pick up on some PowerPoint presentations. A lot of people see Dr. Kaufman's map. I no longer use Dr. Kaufman's map because I don't need to. I have the government's PowerPoint presentations and their maps to show you. This is the Southeastern Ecological Framework. It is a PowerPoint slideshow from the United States Department of EPA, Region 4 out of Atlanta. All of the green area is non-human intrusion zones. And so now, let me pick up on this next slide and explain this. My explanation of what they're saying in this particular slide. We have an eco hub here and an eco hub there. They are intended to be 5,000 acres or larger. I have many documents that get into great detail explaining all this. If you want further explanation, I can provide those documents for you. It can be that one puddle on 1 acre of land is declared to be an eco hub. Just depends on what the stakeholder groups wants to do, or whether the code enforcement officer has the authority to do that, comes to your property and declares it so, and you have to skirt around it, maintain it the status quo, or else you'll be fined or maybe even have your property sold. At any rate, most of these eco hubs are intended to be very large, 5,000 acres or larger. We have what is called an interconnecting corridor that connects one to the other. It bypasses all human settlements, all structures made by man. As a matter of fact, as one wolf may migrate from one hub to the other, they don't want that wolf to hear one sound made by a human being. We are to establish species equity through this system. Now, the reason is because we don't want the gene pool of that wolf to degrade itself by intermating within that eco hub for the next 1,000 years. That's actually from some of the State Department documents that talk about this program. So now here is another slide from the federal government, and you just heard my explanation, and this is, I hope for you, a mirroring of authoritative language of what I just said. It says that linear features linking core areas wind through human-dominated land like agriculture or development, allow animal, seed, and pollen movement between core areas, linkages calculated separately between forest, wetland, and aquatic core areas. Now there is, you will see in this afternoon's quote, something about the Coastal Zone Management Program. That will be, the coastal zone will be part of the aquatic core area. When we went to Australia They had just declared the Coral Sea to be an aquatic core area. It is as big as Texas. Australians are not allowed to fish in that core area. So when we talk about the Gulf Coast and the Great Lakes, we're talking about an aquatic core area. It's going to kill fishing. They're using incremental implementation to do that. I was just talking to someone from the Gulf Coast, and now they're restricting fishing to commercial fishing to 27 days a year. You can imagine how fishermen's going to be able to make a living at that point. We have in Alabama something called the Forever Wild program. We have, remember, Mrs. Googe was talking about setting aside 1/3 of the county for open space, green space, a litany of different things. In Alabama, we have a constitutional amendment that was passed, and I'm ashamed to say I didn't have enough information to know better. I voted for this in 1992. It just was refunded for another 20 years. They can spend as much as $300 million of the taxpayer money in Alabama to purchase land and set it aside for this program. Currently, this is the map that shows the area that's already set aside in Alabama. Now, this includes federal government park lands and lands that have conservation easements on it, and lands that are outright owned by this consortium that's called Alabama Forever Wild. When I punch the button, you're going to see the map from the EPA that has already been mapped. The southeast has already been mapped, and this is the state of Alabama after everything's all said and done. All of the green area is no human intrusion zones. The state of Virginia just came on board with their map. I looked for Ohio, I could not find one, and I do have the webinar where officials from the EPA and other regional areas of the EPA were discussing the fact that they were mapping the rest of the country for this program. If you need that, I can give it to you.
Do you mean the light green?
All shades of green. All shades of green. The dark green is the core areas. A lighter green is the interconnecting corridor, and then it has SEAs and PEAs. Priority ecological areas and SEAs, sensitive ecological areas. Essentially has all the same.
You know, is it current?
This is a current map from the EPA.
So it's already done.
Well, let me say this: they've got to acquire the land by whatever means. So, and let me back up. This is where they are now. Okay, so they have to move from there to this, and they're using our money, our tax money. And it's been a difficult process of trying to get people to understand this.
Go back.
Go back.
What do they own right now?
They own all of the red.
All of the red.
All of the red.
Okay.
Is what it's currently owned.
This looks like population elimination is what it looks like to me.
Well, that may, I don't get into all that. So let me go on and talk about the Ohio Clean program, because it is a 2000 constitutional amendment, very similar to what the state of Alabama did back in 1992. We were way ahead of you guys. You didn't do this until 2000. And it says that this amendment enables environmentally safe and productive development of publicly and privately owned land. Next it says, this process will be accomplished through land acquisition and other means. Now, we'll go into a little more detail about the constitutions, because all constitutions have in the beginning usually a preamble, and then it has a Bill of Rights, and then it has the body of the structure for the state government. The most important things are always put first, and there's already been court cases that define that if there is a conflict in the state constitution where there's a violation of the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights is mandatory and authoritative. So should other means be in conflict with that Bill of Rights, it behooves you as the people's common noun to assert that on your elected official and bring that to the forefront and have that stricken because it violates unalienable rights. So that's just a heads up on what you may be able to get a little more detail about that in the...
Is there anybody you suggest in the state that somebody can get to help us do that, because we're not attorneys?
Neither am I. And most of what I've learned about all of that has just been recently acquired. So believe me, you may be interested more in what comes in the afternoon session than now, sir.
These century farms that are being basically bought up by the government so that they'll never be used for subdevelopment, you know. They're here in Ohio. You sell out to the government and you get quite a price. You can still reap the profit of the crops you grow, but that farm will never be used for anything but agriculture. Now, is that part of this program?
Oh, yes, it is. Right. Let me talk, while you brought that up, let me talk just a little bit about conservation easement and what has already occurred with it. I'll give you two examples. I think one of them is from Pennsylvania. At least I have some very fuzzy photographs of what occurred to this gentleman. He purchased a farm that had a conservation easement on it. And in the agreement, he could put in structures required for that farm. And he was elderly. He took his life savings and proposed to put a house on it for his son, who had agreed to move onto the farm, take care of him, and then perpetuate the farm. And I don't know which organization had the conservation easement. I think it was the Nature Conservancy, but I'm not positive. Could have been Sierra Club, any number of organizations. Well, they contested it, and they went to court, and of course won an order restraining him from putting a house on that property. So he took his life savings and appealed the issue and got a ruling that said that he could put the farmhouse on there. He built the farmhouse, and then the holder of the conservation easement went back to court and reversed it, and then had an order for him to tear it down. And believe me, I have photographs of the bulldozer pushing the house in, and this old man with the sheriff and son walking off, and both of them have their arm around this man. I mean, it's already a situation where he has no more resources. He can't fight somebody like the Nature Conservancy. Now let me talk about another situation. In Colorado, there was the amount of land was over 200,000 acres, and some farmers wanted to maintain in perpetuity the land that they had cared for future generations. The state of Colorado passed a law giving them tax credits for doing this. So the state of Colorado then all of a sudden found themselves in dire need of revenue, and they disavowed the accreditation for the person that came in and assessed what the value of this tax credit was. And then the state of Colorado demanded that tax, which were now several years back taxes, from the landowners. Well, guess who jumped on board that bandwagon? The federal government. So now these farmers are fighting to keep their property from essentially an unlawful situation, in my viewpoint. Now, there's other things to consider. Once you sell your development rights, thinking that it's in perpetuity, usually what happens, you have kind of a gentleman's agreement that not a gentleman's agreement, you don't get into specificity about when the conservation holder can come on your property. And in some cases, the conservation holder will come in the middle of the night, wake you up, make all kind of noise, harass you. But because it's not specified when the conservation holder can come on your property, he comes whenever he wants to. And the courts have already ruled, well, this is perfectly legit. There's no specification. They may want to see if you're doing something surreptitiously that's against the contract. And of course, when you get ready to sell the other rights to the property, what's it worth? Who are you going to sell it to? Well, you can't live there anymore because you're continually being harassed. The only purchaser is the one that has the development rights and conservation easements already. So now, the owner has all the rights of the property and can do away with that conservation easement and do whatever they want to with that property.
I was just going to say, I'm from Licking County, and they have a Licking County Soil and Water Conservation District. I suspect all the counties have a blah, 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 blah district. Those folks are in up their eyebrows, but they have boards, and they are at least elected boards. And I suggest, again, as part of the solution here, it isn't going to be good enough to come listen. You have got to go find out what those folks are doing and consider getting on those boards. In Licking County, it was a pretty easy process, and a group of us got several people to run for that. We did not get a position, and I'm not even quite sure if we might have been outmaneuvered in the final count, so to speak. But nonetheless, you know, those are the kinds of things that you
really need to be aware, figure out who the shakers and movers are on these conservation easements, because they really are a hateful thing. The citizen loses. And if you know anybody who's thinking about doing that, you better tell them anything you can tell them, and have them really get a tremendous attorney, I suppose, if they're going to go through with it. But they shouldn't go through with it.
Let me say, if you hire an attorney, you're basically declaring yourself to be incompetent in legal matters.
All right, that's
You
fine.
really need to become truly one of the people in this.
okay.
And I'll get one more question, and we'll move.
It's a comment. We also live in Licking County, and the 88 acres behind our property has been turned over, and I had no idea until now what that meant.
Well, I'll make one comment on that, and then I'm trying to move on to other things. But let me say that if the conservation holders determines that you may be endangering certain species on his property, he may run a lawsuit against you. So that's another thing to think about, to bring up to someone that's considering a conservation easement. Now, let me say that when I went through Virginia, in Northern Virginia, the farmers were actually backing the legislation dealing with conservation easements. And they had been asked to come to the presentation where they might learn a little more about what they were actually getting into, and none of them showed up. So, you know, it's going to, if they think that they're going to get a dime out of this, very likely that's how they're going to go. But you know, don't take that as a foregone conclusion. You know, you never know who might hear. And if you have evidence, if you have the photograph of that guy, that older guy that was being walked off his property when his house was being torn down, that's a motivating photograph. So there's a number of things that go along, and homeowners association is a whole other ballgame very similar to this, because you're encumbering your private property rights. Now let me get on and show you this map. This is Lewis County, Tennessee. This is the county where we went and made a presentation. It's online. You can go see the county commissioner where they voted out their proclamation, very important point. And this is Nashville area, so this is all part of Tennessee. I'm going to punch the button and you'll see how much land is going to be set aside in the state of Tennessee. Watch your maps. The Department of Natural Resources in Ohio at some point is going to produce a map very similar to this, and you'll get an idea of whether or not your property is designated core area or some other designation.
They are available.
They are. Well, I looked. Okay, I don't know. This gentleman would be somebody to talk to. So I don't know what color scheme they use here, but in Virginia it's a multitude of colors. In the southeast, the federal government uses shades of green. So this is Habitat 2. Remember, I was talking about the definition for sustainable community. Habitat 2, 1996. Notice this graphics. This is kindly, benevolent Mother Earth gently caressing human settlements and protecting them. That's what they're conveying in this graphics. Now I'm going to pull up a quote from Habitat 1. Habitat 1, 1976. This was held in Vancouver, Canada. When I read this quote, I did not believe it. I read this quote a long time ago, sometime back in the 90s. I said, no, this can't be true. Our delegates from our government would not go to this conference and agree to this. So at the time this information was not on the digitized, it was not on the net, I sent off to the closest depository library. The United Nations has a series of depository libraries across the globe. I contacted the University of Tallahassee, who is a depository library, and I said, send me everything associated with this conference held in 1976. I want to know who the delegates were, who attended, and I want to have a copy of the actual plan of action from that conference. And indeed, this quote is true. I have the hard copy. I printed it. I had to send the books back to the university. This is what it says in paragraph D. It says that land, because of its unique nature and crucial role it plays in human settlements, cannot be treated as an ordinary asset, controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Automatically in this first sentence, we've done away with the free market system. All right, next, private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. If you've made one dime off of a parcel of land, you have committed an act of social injustice. Think about this. If you drive up to that gasoline tank and it measures that database in the sky and determines that you've made X numbers of dollars off of selling property or scheming in property or in some ways making a profit off of a parcel of land, that's an act of social injustice which has to be corrected. So now we write the regulations into the software that automatically goes back and extracts that social unjust act from you in order to apply it in an area where it would be socially just. And if we leave this unchecked, if this is left unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. Social justice, urban renewal and development, the provisions of decent dwellings and healthy conditions for the people can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. Public control and use of land is therefore indispensable. 1976. It goes back a long ways. Sustainable development was just a thought in somebody's mind. Didn't actually have a name until 1987. But here it is, 1976. South Carolina has been dealing with this for some time. Now, I speak to groups a lot of different places, and typically they're all white. Let me tell you, we are a society divided. We have a common ancestry of understanding that we have unalienable rights. We used to have, when I was young, a Thanksgiving that acknowledged the supreme being. We no longer have that. We are a house divided, and if we don't figure out a way to bring that house back together on common principles, we will not succeed in overturning or even slowing this agenda. So now here is Joe Neal. He is a representative to the state legislature in South Carolina. This video was made a number of years ago. I encourage you to take this video. It's online, and if you can't get it offline, I'll give you a copy of this particular DVD. If you have some black friends, minority friends, take it to the pastor, take it to anybody that may have time and the inclination to watch this. Now he's going to show you, or tell you, what the actual ownership of private property is all about in just a few minutes.
Well, what we're facing is a plan for growth and development that's being implemented by the county council here called Vision 2020. It is a flavor or a type of smart growth legislation. And what that simply means is that a vision has been developed by planners for this area. They want to dictate how growth will occur or not occur in this area. And by that result, who will profit or not profit by that plan. And what this plan does, very simply, is to lay out a vision of this area that includes the evolution or creation of villages. They want to force all growth in this area into villages, high density, high population villages. Around these villages will be drawn what are called urban boundary zones. These urban boundary zones will delineate the village from the surrounding countryside. And those two entities, the village and the countryside, will be treated differently by this legislation. Property that is not in the village will find that its value is lessened, reduced, or eliminated. Property within the village will find that property will gain or rise in value because that's the only place where development will be allowed to occur. Now, as an example, recently we had a resident here who put in an application to build a barber shop in his little community. He happened to own some property from the side of a highway in a rural area here. He was told that he could not. That instead, if he wanted a barber shop, he had to go into the little village nearby, a little community, rather than a village, and purchase a site there or negotiate with someone where he has a site to allow him to put up a barber shop. Now, what that did was to render his property useless. The purpose and only property is to find some way to make that property produce wealth, whether it's growing a crop or putting a small business on it. For rural people, particularly in this area, who've never had the opportunity to translate their holdings into wealth, to be told at this point that can never happen, that they will be denied access to water and sewer, that the only place that water and sewer will be able to go will be in the villages that are designated by this plan. That's the problem. It creates a two-tiered system of people and societies here. Those who are in the village will be allowed to accumulate wealth, their property will rise in value. Those of us who are in the rural areas who are not in the village will find that the property values are dropping, that will not allow to do anything with the property practically, that will produce any wealth. That robs these property owners of wealth. It's a takings, in my opinion, because of that.
And it is a taking, and they're taking them incrementally. They're just instituting various regulations that remove our private property rights one at a time. Now this slide, I hope, will bring it home that indeed this is a religion. This is the Ark of Hope, and this is the banner that is off that website. This is the Ark itself. It was made identical to the Ark of the Covenant. It has the eyelets on the four corners, and you slide the poles through it so you can pick up the Ark without harming yourself. It was made from one tree in Germany, shipped over to the New England area, and hand carried to the United Nations Meditation Room, and that's where it lies in state. It was, I think, there for 6 months. Now, I have photographs of various events that were occurring with this Ark. I think this man may be, I don't know for sure, but I think he may be putting something as an offering in front of this Ark. I have photographs of people standing around this Ark in a big circle holding hands. I believe they're praying. I don't know that, but I believe they're praying. And here's what Gorbachev had to say about the document that was inside this Ark, which is the Earth Charter. Now, the Earth Charter is being pushed as a mandatory edict for all countries on the globe. And Gorbachev happened to say, my hope is that the Charter will become a kind of 10 Commandments, a Sermon on the Mount, that provides a guide for human behavior toward the environment in the next century. At some level, those people that buy into this really believe it's a religion. And they don't mind pushing that button, that red button that you saw earlier. Absolutely don't mind it. So now, let me talk about citizens. How do you get citizens to this point where they would be willing to punch this red button? Now, some of this at the top, this is actually a copy of the Earth Charter. This is the Earth Rights Institute. They want to have an ombudsman, in other words, a grievance man for Mother Earth. You likely could have one in your locality that would look after resource extraction from Mother Earth to determine if you were sinning against Mother Earth. Those are my words, my phrases, after having read about all this. There's also the Global Eco Village Sustainable Community Network. All of these are pushing this concept of making it mandatory with this Earth Charter. Now, how do you get a citizen to adopt all of this? And I hope this brings it home. Of the parents. So we have at least one older generation that already agrees with this concept, and we're bringing up a second generation. This is not an isolated case. Go to YouTube and type in Pledge of Allegiance to the Earth. You will find more hits than you want to. Believe me, one hit is one more than I wanted to. But this is the way that we create citizens that would have no qualms about punching that red button. Now, what is the purpose of government? What is government? I know that George Washington said that government is fire. You better use it in a proper manner or you're going to get hurt. The best definition that I've ever seen is the next one that I'm about to put up on the screen. Government properly constituted under God's law is the transfer of specific obligations and responsibilities. I have rights up there. I needed to change that. Obligations and responsibilities are transferred and designated by the people to an entity called government. Government becomes a legal fiction, an idea that is described in a written format. The written document is a charter, a contract, a constitution which contains the mission statement that spells out the purpose of government. Now, I've read a lot of declarations of rights in various state government constitutions. And I'm here to tell you, I'm proud to say, that Alabama has the best explanation of the purpose of government. Article 1, Section 35 of the Constitution of the state of Alabama says that the sole object and only legitimate end of government is to protect future species and future generations. No, it doesn't say that. It says to protect the citizen in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property. Now, I'm going to stop with that phrase, and I'm going to explain a little bit about life, liberty, and property, because that's the original phrase. If I said life, liberty, and property in the 1700s, everybody would have known what I was talking about and who coined that phrase. It was coined by John Locke. He was the third most quoted individual or entity within the founding era. And Jefferson came along and looked at the phrase and said, well, it's redundant. Life and property. If life is the first aspect of property, can't be anything else after that. So he substituted pursuit of happiness, and that's what we know in the Declaration of Independence. Now, let me pose a thought to you, that if government will not protect the first aspect of property among the most innocent among us, don't think that they won't hesitate to take your private property as an adult. We're already there. Now, what happens when government deviates from this? Well, it's usurpation and oppression. So I hope you have enjoyed this. It's been some enlightening, and we have many more slides that we can go on and on, but Eileen stands up.